Welcome. Hi, I'm Mikki, and this is Mikkipedia, where I sit down and chat to doctors, professors, athletes, practitioners, and experts in their fields related to health, nutrition, fitness, and well-being. And I'm delighted that you're here. Morning, everyone. Hope you're having a great week. As good as it can be, given that New Zealand, or at least Auckland, will probably still be in level 4 by the time this is published on Wednesday. Potentially Wellington will be too, and hopefully the South Island has sort of come out of the highest restriction of lockdown. But I'm recording this on Sunday, so who knows. At any rate, at least you can spend the next hour or so disassociating yourself with current affairs by tuning into my interview with Jeff Rothschild. Now, Jeff is a registered dietitian with a master's degree in nutritional science and a board-certified specialist in sports dietetics. Jeff and I are chatting today about his current research, his doctoral studies, looking at pre-training and performance nutrition and the impact this has on fuel utilization. Jeff's research is under the guidance of Dr. Dan Plews, who is the Ironman age grouper world champion, as you know, at the Sports Performance Research Institute in New Zealand, SPRINZ in Auckland, and is currently conducting trials looking at the effect of pre-exercise nutrition on the adaptations to endurance training. And so Jeff and I spend a large section of today's talk discussing his original findings in the survey that he conducted to find out what athletes were actually doing. Surprisingly, there was not a lot of research out there. And then delving into some of these pre-trials that he's conducted, looking at the changes that those nutritional inputs have on adaptations to endurance exercise. And I'll say that some of Jeff's findings have certainly influenced how I approach pre-training nutrition for myself and also with clients. Jeff also is a clinician practitioner. He works with Olympians, triathletes competing at Kona, and professional tennis players, as well as people just trying to complete their first triathlon, feel better, improve their energy levels, and learn how they should be eating to achieve their goals. In addition to talking about Jeff's current research, we talk a little bit about his background and particularly Jeff's former life as a music producer, rubbing shoulders with some of my favourite musicians. So it was real fun to talk to Jeff about that as well. Before we crack on into the show though, just want to let you know that if you're picking this up on a Wednesday or Thursday, you still have time until Thursday evening to jump on board Monday's Matter Spring Edition. We are kicking off Monday 30th of August. And so I need to cut off registration for that on Thursday to allow enough time for you guys to get all your ducks in a row and sort your shopping, figure out the nuts and bolts of the program, and introduce yourself and kind of get familiar with the group, because we are kicking off, as I said, on Monday, and I'm so looking forward to it. Cannot wait. In addition to that though, of course you can always jump on board the Recipe Access portal that I have, which is a great way to support the podcast as well. So you get access to all of the recipes that I put online, in addition to the Facebook group and the ability for you to ask me some of your pertinent nutrition questions. And I've had a number of sign-ups over the last few weeks with that since we've made it available, which is fantastic. So without further ado though, please enjoy my conversation that I have with Jeff Rothschild. Cool. I think we are on. Jeff, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing all right, thanks. Happy to chat with you. Yeah.
Great. Hey, thanks so much for taking the time. And, obviously I want to do a good dive into your current research and just some of the things you're finding with regards to metabolism, fuel substrate use, and endurance athletes, obviously, but actually, Jeff, as I understand it, you almost had a previous life before you were a
dietitian, a researcher, and things like that. So, did you not brush shoulders with some of the biggest names in music?
Yeah, it's funny. The word gets around. I used to be a recording engineer, mix engineer, drummer. So basically, for someone that that doesn't know what that is, that basically the person who twists the knobs and hits the button when someone's making a record, kind of making it sound the way it sounds, and like the one actually hitting record, so to speak, and then shaping the sounds to sound like what we hear. But yeah, I did that with a lot of rock and pop bands. I guess I can name a few: Bon Jovi and Rod Stewart and Santana. Take That. I mean, it kind of goes on. I had a really enjoyable and really good career for a while, but cycling was something I had gotten into as a hobby, and learning about nutrition, and I just found it so interesting. And for a while, I was happy just to leave it as a hobby. It's the studio day would be from like noon to midnight, but that way I could go for bike rides in the mornings and things like that, and I was enjoying that. But it got to the point where I wanted to just pursue it, and I got progressively burnt out doing what I was doing, and was progressively more interested in nutrition, and so I left that career and really started from scratch. I guess no pun intended. And went back to school, did a master's degree in nutrition, and literally, there was about a 2-week span where I was literally on a helicopter with Bon Jovi, which certainly wasn't an everyday experience, but nonetheless, that was able to do things like that. And then a couple weeks later, sitting in like a community college chemistry class, that was quite the change. But I really I welcomed it, and I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed this process so much of learning about all this stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think it's such a courageous move to sort of take from a successful sort of career to like realizing your passion and sort of taking that risk to turn that passion into another career. Because one of the things you often hear is, you might really love something, but once you start studying it, that's a surefire way to sort of like kill a bit of that. Yeah.
For me, it's I think the passion, if will, the enjoyment is in the learning and the process of it, and so the growing process and the learning process, and so it's that's what I enjoyed about music. And the first bunch of years, I was able to really keep growing and progressing, and then it kind of got to the point where I just felt like I was a bit stagnant, and there's always something you could learn, but it just felt like I was kind of at a plateaued and wasn't learning, and so this career has allowed me to do that, certainly in several different phases. First, I was doing a master's degree and became a dietitian, and then building a career, a private practice, and then deciding to kind of come almost another sidestep, if you will, to come back and do my PhD. And I still do see some people remotely, but it's not the full-time thing that I'm spending most of my time doing the research we're working on.
Yeah. And so you were in private practice in LA, is that correct? Yeah. What was the climate for your services like over there, just as a reason? I'm always really interested because, here in New Zealand, where as a nutritionist and dietitian, like unless you are in that hospital setting, for a lot of people, it is either that you are, you see as many clients as possible and get burnt out, or you see clients for half the time and then you spend the other half of the time doing some sort of part-time like role. What's it like? What was it like over there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did also, in addition to just doing nutrition consulting, I did also exercise testing. So it was it kind of set me up nicely for the things I'm doing now, of course. So people that would come in for a VO2 max test or a lactate test and things like that. So I was able to. Obviously, it's very intertwined with the nutrition side, especially when you're looking at things like substrate oxidation, and people are curious how much fat they're burning and things like that. So you really can bridge those two. But it was, I guess, enough of a variety that my days, sometimes I was doing more of the testing, and some days just sitting kind of with clients. So I think certainly a lot of people work in hospital settings and things like that. For me, it's certainly hard to build a private practice, as I'm sure you know. You've done a fantastic job of that. But yeah, it's just a slow kind of grind, and yeah.
Okay, so I don't know how much you want to talk about this, but don't worry, I won't linger. But I do have a couple of questions. One, so you've just mentioned a couple of my favourite artists, particularly John Bon Jovi. So who was your favourite to work with, and who, like, they all look like they're in peak shape? And I mean, obviously, if I'm thinking back in the 70s and 80s and all the drugs and alcohol and stuff, but the ones that you mentioned, I sort of think to myself, they've just got to keep it together because they just look, aged but as fit as they did when, or even fitter than in their younger years.
Yeah, well, Bon Jovi was some of my favorite people to work with. I mean, the whole group, not just John Bon Jovi, but the band and the whole organization was. I made I think 4 or 5 records with them, and yeah, it's. I think they would kind of joke about it. I mean, it's definitely different from the '80s. I mean, now it's like sparkling water, and there's chiropractors around, and things like that. So they definitely you have to take that seriously. Particularly as you age, and if you're trying to run around on the stage, take that with some of my favorite people to work with as well. Really enjoyed. I spent a few summers in London making kind of this comeback for those that know the group, kind of their comeback records. So that was really enjoyable, and I enjoyed a lot of times the process. I mean, you're in a small room with someone for 12 hours a day for anywhere between one week to several months. And so it's kind of like going on a car road trip with someone. You see the good and the bad and all sides of people, and just an interesting bonding experience that you don't get just when you're interacting with people on a short in short spurts.
Totally. And actually what you just described with that sort of 12 hours a day type thing reminds me of what athletes get when they go on training camps.
Exactly.
For 3 to 5 days they're just in it with all other athletes. They're all got this shared sort of vision, and I can see that you get a really good bonding experience. Jeff, now you mentioned that you did cycling. Cycling's your sort of sport. Have you always been a cyclist? Have you sort of dabbled in other sports?
No, growing up, I was really into tennis, and then playing in tournaments and things like that, and then in kind of my late teens and early 20s was really focused on music. So that was I was very inactive actually, and then kind of at some point as I was doing the music, I just started cycling, and I had gotten back into tennis as well, but cycling was just something I kind of just randomly picked up initially as to commute around, and then I had a friend who was a road cyclist, and so we started going on some rides, and that kind of seemed like a lot of fun. And believe it or not, Los Angeles is a fantastic place for cycling. Unbelievable riding out there.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I got to be spoiled on these great roads and hills and things like that.
Yeah. And is that where your sort of interest in nutrition grew from?
Yeah, I think so. Starting to get healthier. I mean, again, in my early 20s, I just didn't really think about nutrition one way or the other, and then really started seeing how much different it made me feel. And it's kind of a typical story of people, especially among dietitians. You kind of see how much it impacts your own well-being in life, and then makes you want to learn more and then share that with others.
Yeah, sure. And so you went on to do your master's. What did you focus on in your master's?
That was, technically nutritional science. And at that point, I was really into fasting, time-restricted eating windows, and that was kind of my area of interest, and more so than the sports as well, but particularly with food timing and how that affects our body clock and things like that.
So from that, were there any sort of key kind of learning moments for you with with what you found?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that really kind of cemented in me the importance of food timing. So what you eat certainly matters, but I think everyone focuses. Now it's becoming more aware of. People are becoming more aware that when you eat is important too. But this was, let's say 10 years ago, it wasn't. Time restricted eating was really an early thing. It was just kind of, a little bit of research, alternate day fasting. There had been some studies, but it was all kind of, fasting in general was kind of new, and circadian biology had definitely been established, but not, nearly to the degree of things that have come out in the past for, let's say, 5 years, showing that, time restricted eating windows, let's say, are a thing that people can do, and they're often beneficial. And we'll talk about the nuances there, but let's say an early time restricted eating window compared to a late window has different effects. Looking at shift workers and how that affects things, and there's really so much there that is people that focus solely on macros and calories are just really missing a huge lever, I guess, if you will.
And then, so how did it come to be that you were working in LA? You'd completed your master's. That now you're in Auckland, New Zealand. What sort of drew you to cross to the other side of the world?
No, that's a good question. I was working, and I'd stayed kind of dabbling in research, and it was certainly something that was a big interest to me. And I did a few studies, like in triathletes in the place I was working at. But I felt like I definitely wanted to take the next step, and part of it was, let's say certain research questions I was curious about. I could either wait for someone else to answer them and hopefully figure out the answers that I wanted to know, or I could actually just go try to figure them, try to do that, and chose the latter, and just it's something I kind of wanted to do, and it finally just seemed like the right time to kind of take that additional step. As far as being here, there's I wanted somewhere that had a great reputation, like somewhere where the work I was aware of from there, and people doing great applied research. So I was certainly very familiar with my supervisors, Dan Plews and Andy Kilding. I'd followed their work without knowing them, and so I was certainly very impressed. And I wanted somewhere that was really applied and in a nice place to live wouldn't hurt, and so just kind of all the things that I was looking for, being able to kind of self direct the project, direct the topic. So some PhDs, as you certainly know, are kind of you're slotting into, like, here's a research question that's being answered. So if you want to do that, fine. But in this case, in this environment, there's a little bit more flexibility to design the type of research you want to do, presuming it's within the umbrella of what the place does. But that the things that I was interested in seemed like a really good fit with Dan and Andy and the Sprins in general.
Was it surprising to you, Jeff, that your area of research was relatively untapped? Because, to be honest, when I came across your proposal, I was surprised that, and I think and I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like it's because there are so many different messages out there of what to eat before training, and everyone has an opinion that you sort of think, well, surely that's based on some kind of like really solid foundation of science.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, exactly. That there's, if you listen to people talk, practitioners or coaches and athletes, like, it sounds like we know exactly what does what, and what we should be doing. And then when you really look into, like you said, where that foundation is, it's very there's just not a lot, actually. We know a lot about the acute response to exercise, like if you have carbohydrate during or before exercise, kind of what happens. That's been kind of I'd say fairly well studied. But as far as these longer term adaptations, so should you eat, basically, I guess for those that don't know, my PhD research is kind of figuring out what should you eat before exercise in the context of getting the most out of your endurance training sessions and your endurance training adaptations. So yeah, the let's say assumed knowledge is shouldn't be, we shouldn't make so many assumptions about what we think we know.
Yeah. And I mean, someone would argue that most of nutrition is really based on that sort of, assumption. But I mean, you're doing a fabulous job of sort of actually doing the trials to help make a much more informed information or foundation for, what we can tell our clients. And one of your first studies was obviously a survey done in I believe, was it like 1,950 people or something?
Yeah,
it was quite
exactly.
a massive group. So do you want to sort of talk us through what that survey was designed to find, but also what did you find?
Yeah. So generally, I guess just for a PhD, we kind of have this research question, and you kind of come at it from a few different angles to try to get some cohesive body of work. So that first part of this then is if the question is, if we want to know what should we eat before exercise, essentially, we want, an interesting part of that, or a good thing to know, is what are people actually doing? Like, what are endurance athletes all around the world actually eating before exercise, and what's dictating those decisions? How many people are doing fasted training? Again, fasted training is something that's so commonly talked about, so commonly done, but there was really no idea how many people actually do it. And so, we created a survey that was, meant to be kind of short and easy, and something that could be circulated really far around the world, and so 2,000 people completed that, and we wanted to know, what do you eat before training and why, essentially. And we separated things out, and we looked at people's habitual dietary patterns and their competitive level, how much they're training, when they're training, like if how much of their training is in the morning versus the afternoon, etc. And then we also split that into what do you eat before easy or short sessions, so less than 90 minutes, and what do you do before longer sessions? Because there, it's probably a reason to think people would do something different. And then also, do you eat differently before a short session or an easy session or a hard session? And all these kind of, we just kind of want to get to what's driving people to make the decisions that they do. I guess the big kind of takeaways, and somewhat surprising things, I guess, for me, were that a lot of people do fasted training. I'm just pulling up, I want to not tell the wrong numbers here. But about 2/3 of people of endurance athletes do at least some type of fasted training, which was, I guess, not super surprising, but a bit higher than I would think.
Like, if I just ask you, Jeff, with some of your clients, but also what you do, is that different from what you have seen in practice, or? Is that why you were surprised, or?
Well, I guess there was just no number. Like I didn't have any sense of like, yeah, I guess some people do and some people don't. Some people have a little something. I mean, I guess it varies. So about it was 63% and a little bit. It was more in females, or excuse me, more in males than females. And then the reasons, what really then it gets to what I think is interesting and what leads to the next studies we've been doing is, why do people train in the fasted state? And so the number one reason is utilizing fat as a fuel source. And then oftentimes people will do it because of gut comfort and also just time constraints or convenience. So people just wake up early enough and they don't want to eat. But some people think it's beneficial in their training. Some people are doing it for weight loss. Some people then think it's not beneficial. And so what we get to is, some people do it because they think it's really helpful and it's going to help them burn more fat. And then some people avoid it because they think it's not helpful and it's going to harm their training. And so I guess in some ways everyone can be right, but we thought, okay, there's people have really strong feelings about this, because we also asked on kind of their beliefs around these things. But these beliefs aren't, like we said before, they're not based on a whole lot of great evidence. And so these understanding what people are doing and why then could let us set up the next couple of studies that we're doing to try to answer some of these things.
And was there any gender difference as well, or sex difference?
Yeah, there was sex differences across a lot of things, across the beliefs. So the number, so about 72% of males did fasted training, whereas about 54% of females. Pretty big difference there. The reasons, for females, it was more because of gut comfort and convenience, whereas the males were more interested in utilizing fat as a fuel source. There was differences kind of across the board in almost all these questions between sex, and habitual diet was a big one too. So generally, this might not be surprising, but people on a lower carbohydrate diet do more fasted training. That kind of seems intuitive. It doesn't seem too surprising, but at the same time, we never had a number. We kind of that's never really been, as far as I knew, studied. So it's interesting to see that, because inherently being on a low carb diet shouldn't mean you do more fasted training. Actually, if the benefits are increased fat burning, then you're going to get that from a low carb diet anyway. So you probably would need fasted training even less if that was the benefit. So
see, that's interesting, because when I'm thinking about the practical application of low carb, it almost always comes alongside those kind of 4 strategies to help upregulate fat oxidation, and one of which is to train in a fasted state. So to me, it sort of fits nicely within that sort of low carb paradigm. But I totally appreciate what you're saying. There's nothing, if you're low carb anyway, you're going to have depleted glycogen stores, probably less of a need to do it. Yeah,
exactly. And competitive level too. So there were some differences between pro athletes versus recreational athletes, and that was good to see kind of a snapshot of what a large amount of people are actually doing.
Yeah, nice. And so you said that this helped inform the next stage of your research. So do you want to just describe where you went from there?
Yeah. So then a study that we published just a few weeks ago, I think now, what that was an acute study, but a crossover study. So people, we tested 3 different breakfast options before the same workout. So either fasted training, or a high carb breakfast, or just a protein rich breakfast. So essentially a scoop of protein powder and some peanut butter. And we wanted to see, does it affect things like fat burning, and how about, and as well as performance during interval training. So we had people do some 20 minutes of essentially easy to moderate cycling, so we can measure how much fat they're burning and things like that. And then we had them do 6 by 3 minute intervals to see what their work capacity was, if there was a difference. Because a lot of people think, okay, I'll do my easy sessions fasted, and I'm going to eat before my hard sessions because my performance will suffer. That was one of the things that we saw from the surveys, that people avoid fasted training. Either they're going to get too hungry, or their performance will suffer. And then people that say they do fasted training because either they want the fat oxidation, or because of gut comfort. There were some other reasons too, but those were kind of the big things. And so we were able to test a lot of those things in this study. So what we found was, as far as the fat oxidation, fasted training certainly burns more fat during that workout compared with if you've had a carbohydrate-rich breakfast. But also the kind of the new thing that it's been shown a couple times, but not as much, and that is protein allows you to burn almost as much fat as if you're fasted. So if you were hungry, but you didn't want to eat a carb breakfast to shut down your fat burning, then you could have a scoop of protein powder and with some peanut butter or something if you want, and still, so you essentially be fed a low carb breakfast, and then still allows you to burn a lot of fat.
And what would be the advantage do you see of an athlete deciding to do that over and above just doing fasted training?
Yeah, so for someone who's training about 5 or 6 hours a week, it probably wouldn't matter. If they're doing an hour of exercise a day, it makes probably no real difference. For someone who's training 15, 20, 25 hours a week, they're accumulating a huge calorie deficit. And so if you can, stuff 300 calories in, before that workout where you're going to burn, even in an hour, a good, a strong athlete can burn 1,000 calories pretty easily in an hour. That's going to help, obviously not completely remove a deficit, but it's going to help to kind of reduce your deficit that you're creating. So that's one benefit. Getting enough protein is, a thing for, sometimes it's a challenge for people. So it gives you a good opportunity to take in some protein.
Yeah, nice. And what about like the work rate or performance measure there? Was there anything looked at there?
So there was no differences in performance. That was a bit surprising, although when we think about it, so like the watts during those 3-minute intervals were essentially even. Carbohydrate would be expected to have a benefit if it was a longer, more glycogen depleting session. So if it was like 90 minutes or longer, we might expect carbs to have an advantage. But, most people's kind of weekday workouts where they think, okay, this is a key session, so I'm going to eat before, it still might only be an hour. And there's no real need to eat before the workout. If you want to, you can. So the big takeaway is if you want to, you can, but you don't have to. And it won't really sacrifice your performance if it's around an hour workout. Also, people were equally hungry or equally less hungry on any of the three. So hunger was not different in any case between the three conditions. So if you're hungry, so let's say when you wake up and you're hungry, you can still do the workout. At the end, you're going to be less hungry because actually the workout will lower your appetite, and it won't. You'll be, I guess, put it differently. At the end of the workout, you'll be exactly as hungry as you would be if you had a few hundred calories of carbs or protein.
Yeah, interesting. And as I understand it, you measured kind of post-workout and not sort of subsequent hunger across the day. Is that?
Yeah, that's true. So there could have been some differences that showed up, but as far as this was more to say how people feel. And at the end of, because after the workout, then it's time to eat. They can eat whatever they want.
Totally.
So they're equally hungry at the end of the workout if they've eaten or not eaten. And it's only an hour, so again, there probably would be some differences if you had like a 3-hour ride and a 3-hour workout and you hadn't eaten and things like that. But I think this the workout we had set up is kind of very practical. It's something that a cyclist might do. Warm up for 20 minutes and then do some intervals, and that's your kind of before workout.
Yeah, totally. And I also think about it in terms of not necessarily just athletes, but there are a heap of people doing things like F45 and, those kind of, in CrossFit where you have some sort of like warm-up AMRAP or I don't know, whatever, right. And then do 20 minutes of work, That's
it, yeah, or any kind of spin class or any kind of like hour-long workout. I mean, that kind of fits into a lot of people's schedules. And it's really up to you if you want to eat, but don't think, I have to eat or my performance will suffer.
Yeah. So Jeff, like what about the carbohydrate before exercise? And I guess I ask this because someone who has come from, like you, studied nutrition science, did your master's, thought you knew it all, then realize you know nothing, and then kind of go on to the low carb, think you know it all, and then realize, so, you're always evolving as a practitioner, right? And, we certainly, probably about 5 years ago, I'm sure I would have said something like, if you eat any sort of carbohydrate, you're going to shut down your carbohydrate burning. So what would I say now to an athlete who, might be going out doing a workout that incorporates some high intensity, yet also want to, are they completely shutting off fat oxidation? Like what's the story there?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. And like that question, that's like what I was struggling with when I was a practitioner. I think these kind of questions, like, what do you tell people what to eat for exercise? I mean, if you want to, you can tell people what. A lot of people have very strong opinions, but the more you learn, like you said, you realize we don't really know, and so that's what kind of got me back to school here. So to the question, well, sorry, specifically, what kind of workout would we be talking about?
Yeah, so like if someone has carbohydrate before the workout, is there a level to which?
Yeah. So this is actually a project I'm working on now to kind of figure this out a little bit more. But basically, you have to consider, so if we're just thinking about burning fat, like how much fat and carb you're burning, we got to consider the duration of exercise. So the longer you go, the more you're going to rely towards fat. The intensity, that's going to change it. So the higher intensity, you're going to rely more on carbs. and then other factors like what you've eaten before exercise and your glycogen levels and things like that. But if we just think about the duration and intensity, if someone is doing a higher intensity workout, they're going to be burning carbs anyway, whether you've eaten or not. And if you're doing a low intensity workout, if you're going long enough, so, I don't know, an hour, 2 hours, the longer you go, the more you're going to be reliant on fat, even if you've had a ton of carbs beforehand.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends, but to your question of if, let's just say it's that 20 or 30 minute of steady state exercise, what we found also was the difference between people was way bigger than the difference between the treatments.
Interesting.
So what that means is, someone who's a very high fat burner, a Dan Plews type, would be burning more fat, even carb fed, than someone else might be when they're fasted. And so that's also a consideration. So you're kind of the other, let's say, the makeup of that person, and that has to do with the training experience and all these other factors. But as far as how that affects, what that exact meal before exercise affects, it affects a little bit, but it's not going to like shut off all fat burning. Also, the timing before the exercise probably matters in terms of fat oxidation, and that is the farther out you have it, the more it's going to suppress your fat oxidation. So if you have a bowl of oatmeal, 90 minutes before exercise, you're probably going to do a good job of kind of squashing down the fat oxidation. If you have that same bowl 10 minutes before, it's probably actually not going to do very much because it's got to take time to go into the system. And so it's still essentially being absorbed during that workout. So probably that matters in terms of that question too. Then there's, so most people are interested in, just burning fat, like you've asked about, well, are you going to burn more fat or carbs? But then, we think about why that is. And a lot of people think it's just going to come off your waistline, which it doesn't really work like that. As you know, you're burning a lot of intramuscular fats, and there's reason we might want to burn more fat, but the reason to do training is we want these longer term adaptations, right? Training adaptations. We want to make more mitochondria, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's a question of, does a higher carb intake impair some of those adaptations? And the question is, the answer is maybe a little, but it's probably more apparent during shorter exercise and during lower intensity exercise. So if you're going at an easy kind of a zone 2, long easy ride, if you had like a giant pancake breakfast beforehand, maybe that you could be impairing some of the potential benefit from that. But if you're doing a really hard interval workout, actually I don't see how any blunting of these adaptations. If you're working hard enough, essentially, if you're kind of going into, like, let's just say any kind of hard workout where you really let it rip, the molecular signaling doesn't seem to be, at least like the AMPK signaling is something I've looked very closely at. We have an interesting paper that's in review at the moment, and I'll be excited to share that one with you. But anyway, if you're causing enough disturbance inside your muscle, in terms of those type of adaptations, I don't see why that would blunt anything.
Okay. You mentioned AMPK signaling. Could you just explain that to people who might not be familiar?
Yeah. So when we exercise, a bunch of stuff happens in our muscle. And to get fitter, essentially, there's this unbelievable symphony of changes that happen at the molecular level inside our muscles. Things are moving around and talking to each other and going to different parts of the cell. And with the net effect, hopefully, being we make our muscles get fitter. Right? We do exercise that's a little bit hard, whether it's resistance training or endurance training. When it's a little bit hard, then our body responds a little bit and we get a little bit fitter each time. That's the general adaptive process. So what we can do is look at certain types of these signals, the things that are kind of doing the orchestra conducting, if you will, inside the cells, and kind of see what's causing them to change. And with the theory being these change in response to an acute workout, and then over time these adaptations accumulate. So AMPK is one of the kind of more well-studied. You can think of it as like a nutrient sensor. When you have low energy, a low ATP availability, then this thing, it's like a fuel gauge that flips on and causes some other signaling to happen, that things that we generally would consider beneficial from an endurance training standpoint. So all that is to say, if we look at that signaling and we say it's not influenced, if you're doing a hard workout, it's going to cause this signal to rise and and cause these little adaptations that we expect and we want to get from a workout.
Yeah. And if we're fasted, will it, and like if we do fasted training versus, say, taking on the protein, is there no difference in that AMPK signal?
That probably not. It's actually, you could point to some that say yes and some that say no, but probably the best sense I can give you of it would be that if the workout is hard enough, it won't matter anyway. And if it's an easy or low intensity workout, the glycogen might matter. Muscle glycogen probably matters more than if you're fasted or not fasted. So I guess as a little sidestep for people to make sure we're on the same page, overnight, when we're overnight fasted, our muscle glycogen isn't really any different from when we went to sleep, but our liver glycogen is what's depleted. So if you go to sleep with the muscle glycogen, normal, let's say if you're on a normal diet, or if it's low, if you're on a low carb diet, then that's how you're going to wake up, and that's going to have more of an influence than whether you're fed or fasted.
Okay, awesome. On that then, this is a bit of a tangent, but does it matter what people eat before they race? If that, from a glycogen perspective, or liver glycogen? Yeah,
from a liver glycogen it would. And so we'd want, that's kind of the thing for whether you're high or low carb, you have let's say you've carb loaded, and whatever that means to you, but when you go to sleep the night before a race, your carb stores are at some level, and they're going to wake up, like I said, the same level in your muscles, but your liver will be a bit depleted. So the thing that, the benefit, or the purpose, I should say, of the morning meal is to kind of top up your liver more so than your muscles. So your muscle glycogen, that work has already been done in the day or days before. It's the liver that you just want to have a little top up.
Yeah, nice. And like when I saw the results of your study, I thought it totally changed my, or it made me feel far more confident about recommending people eat before exercise, and also what to eat before exercise. How we sort of got into this space was looking at Bob Seeberhor's work on metabolic efficiency. And whilst he actually his original work wasn't actually based on low carb, but for whatever reason, it sort of aligned with the whole concept of reducing down carbohydrate load to help upregulate that fat oxidation. So I'd always actually kind of put him in that low carb camp, not realizing that he sort of went that way a few years later. So I wonder what influence having protein and carbs together might have, say like a banana in your protein shake might have to, fat oxidation and stuff like that. I know we can only speculate, I assume.
Yeah, well that kind of gets to then our next study, the thing we have going now. And if there's anyone that is interested, any athletes, we are certainly looking for athletes to participate. Well, let me take get another sidestep. Well, so that study we're just talking about, that showed us an acute bout of exercise. So we showed basically your fat oxidation will be higher if you're fasted or if you've had protein, and your performance will basically be the same regardless of what you've had. But that doesn't answer the question of, okay, well, I'm going to do 2 or 3, these interval sessions a week over many weeks and months and years. So is there a difference for my longer term adaptations? At the same time, a lot of people think, okay, I'm going to do my low intensity sessions fasted, like I said, to try to increase fat burning. So that's the approach I want to take. But how does that influence these adaptations over time? So what we're doing now is we're looking at a mixed training. So three weeks of training following one of those 3 breakfasts, except now we're looking at it. So again, it's a carb-rich breakfast, which is basically like a sports drink and some toast and jam or something along those lines. Or the protein. Yeah, I think so. A protein breakfast, so protein powder with peanuts, peanut butter, something like that, or fasted training.
Yeah.
And so we have people doing 4 low intensity sessions per week and 2 interval sessions per week. That breakfast that I described is before the 4 low intensity sessions per week. So if you're in the protein group, you're only going to have the protein powder before this low intensity training. And if you're in the fasted group, etc. And then the 2 interval sessions per week everyone's having a standardized breakfast.
Nice.
So yeah, that basically allows, we don't want, one of the problems with a lot of the other studies is they're either like, they're only going to have people do low intensity training, or it's only an interval training study. This is, again, more likely what people are doing. They think, okay, I'm going to eat before my interval sessions, and then my low intensity training, I want to be, let's say, fasted or with, the low carb breakfast or something like that. And so, we're going to see, how does this affect, like, people having carbs before all of their low intensity training? Does that actually, is it any different? We expect everyone to get fitter over these 3 weeks. So again, if you're listening and you're curious, this is a 3-week training plan designed to make you fitter, both in terms of your aerobic capacity and your anaerobic capacity. So the interval training is going to be kind of neutral. So everyone's doing the same intervals and they're all fed. And we'll see. The fat adaptation, the fat burning adaptations. How will those change if you're fed or fasted? Is it any different if you're eating the carbs beforehand. And another key point is in these other studies, if you test people in the fasted state or if you test people in the fed state, that's a big question. If you test people, if someone's been doing fasted training and then you test them in the fasted state, they'll tend to be showing greater fat adaptation improvements. But in the handful of studies that have tested people in the fed state after this period of training, there's oftentimes no differences. So we want to see in this scenario, we're testing people pre and post, but following just a small breakfast, but a standardized breakfast. And then we'll see, I mean, are people's fat burning adaptations improved from the fasted training? You know, I don't know if they will be. If I had to guess, it'd be hard to hazard a guess. I actually don't expect, I'm not sure what I expect, but I'd lean towards them being more similar than different.
Okay.
And also like 30-minute time trial power, which is, you know, a key metric. We're going to see if that improves more from fasted training, or maybe people can just eat whatever they want before training.
So with that fasted training kind of arm, are they doing everything fasted, or still the low intensity?
Just the low intensity, just the 4 low intensity sessions fasted, and then the intervals they're getting fed.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And is it cyclists?
Your
athletes?
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, cyclists, triathletes. We want people that are fairly well trained. We're looking for people that are currently training around 7 to 12 hours per week, because you know, if you take sedentary people, as you know, they're going to get fitter from anything, and so you wouldn't be able to detect any nutrition differences. And then we also need people training about the same amount, so that the training stimulus is comparable.
Yeah, and male?
In this case, males. We do have other studies though running right now, a running study and a cycling study for females. So if any females listening and they're interested.
No, that's great. Because I was thinking about your studies and thinking I could go and decide I want another PhD and just do the entire thing again on females.
That would be fantastic.
That would be amazing. I don't know that my husband would be so happy for me to do that, but I tell you what, I'm certainly it always sounds like a really good idea in my head. So Jeff, what I'm interested in, when I think about what you're doing, is, a lot of the reason why athletes would choose to go fasted, and this is kind of male and female. And what I found interesting was from your survey, you had a smaller number of women who did fasted training than guys. In my practice, almost every woman I talk to does fasted training. And if they don't, the reason why they don't is because they've heard women shouldn't do fasted training.
Yeah.
And I think your point about how there was a lot of variation between individuals rather than between treatment groups.
Yeah.
You see that time and again in the science with regards to how people respond to nutritional approaches, everyone is super different. But upon saying that though, obviously there was an effect of a particular treatment with what you saw. So there is certainly, it's not find the individual approach that works for you, because we're all going to be different.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So a lot more women do fasted training because I think overall they're actually going to improve their body composition from that. And so in part what this research is, what you found was that they don't influence their fat oxidation that much if they have protein and a little bit of fat prior to training. What I think would be super interesting would be having a look at energy expenditure across a day. And I guess the reason I think this is because relative energy deficiency in sport is something that we have, it's emerging a lot more in that, in our arena for the endurance athlete, and that to go for extended periods of time without food might downregulate metabolism, a whole bunch of areas of metabolism, which then overall sort of energy expenditure across a day will probably be quite low, despite the fact that they've done, a 2-hour kind of training session. Do you see sort of an application for eating before training to help sort of offset what we might see with regards to REDs? And I know this is all speculation because you're not studying it. But
No, I definitely do. I think that's a big important application. And one of the things also from the survey that I didn't mention, only about, I think we asked if people ever do just a low carb meal before training, and it was only about 30% of the time, or 30% of people said they would even do it sometimes. So I think it's a really underutilized opportunity for people to just have something. And like you said, so there's REDs. Another kind of related area to that, and which I don't think gets enough attention also, is within day energy balance, and that's kind of it's kind of talked of as part of that. But for those people listening that are curious, that would mean you could balance your calories on a daily basis, but if you did all of your exercise in the morning and didn't eat anything until dinner and had all your calories dinner, that's an extreme example, but that wouldn't be a good thing, right? But a lot of people, they wake up and you're in a calorie deficit, just because you haven't eaten in 8 or 12 hours. You do a workout where you could burn 500 to 1,000 calories. And then, a lot of people have like a small breakfast, maybe a muffin, or then go to work and then they have like a salad at lunch. And then, start getting that hungry through the afternoon, so you start snacking, and then dinner and let it rip at dinner. And, that's extremely common.
Yeah, it is.
And so what that's doing is creating a huge deficit in the morning and a huge surplus in the evening. And that's not ideal from a hormone standpoint, for body composition standpoint. And so that absolutely, then if you've taken either a full breakfast or let's say just a couple hundred calories of protein and some fat before your workout, and then after, you make sure you get a reasonable meal as a recovery meal, and then kind of a hearty lunch, then you're kind of in much more of a balance, and you can have a much smaller dinner and still be, happily satisfied.
Totally. And, just the mood implications, I just think of so many people who go out for massive training sessions and can, just written off for the rest of the day, and just think that's this inevitable part of being an athlete.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
Jeff, has your research changed what you do personally?
I actually never really liked fasted training, but I did go through to try the study, like my study protocol, and I was doing fasted training. I've tried the protein. It's made me try the protein before exercise, and it's actually opened me up even to fasted training, because I'm one of those people that would be like, I wake up hungry. I like eating a big breakfast. So thinking about 90 minutes of a 90-minute endurance ride fasted, like, sounded terrible to me, but I was able to do it, and I realized, you kind of get used to it, and hunger does go away, and it's fine. So it's kind of made me more open from that standpoint. But it's also made me less afraid to have, like, dates are like my favorite food. Dates and some peanut butter, dates and almond butter. Delicious. You can pack a lot of carbs in a small punch with some dates, as you know. So I would have also thought, okay, I don't want to, quote unquote, ruin the benefit of, let's say, an endurance ride I'm going to do if I jump on the trainer for an hour or whatever, by having some carbs beforehand. But I also, at the same time, think, no, that's not, or definitely if I'm going to do an interval workout or something, I don't believe I'm going to, quote unquote, ruin those benefits either. So it's really made me more open. I guess it's kind of less precious. It'd be nice as you're a practitioner to say you have the perfect answer and make it so precious you have to do exactly this. And a lot of people, unfortunately, make their living by making it so precious. And really, it probably matters less. And I feel like I'm betraying our dietitians by saying things that, it's not to say food doesn't matter, but it's made me start to think, okay, you have more flexibility than some people like to let on.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I remember a few years ago there was someone who worked with high performance sport who made their athletes that they worked with have, like, consume within 5 minutes, consume like 5 gummy lollies, and then 12 minutes later they would have their protein. It was that specific. But of course, as that practitioner, it sort of gives you that voice of authority.
Exactly.
That someone gets from their doctor when they say take these 2 tablets, in half an hour before breakfast.
And some people want that, and some people feel better and more comforted knowing, okay, I have to do this at 5 minutes, and then at 12 minutes I have to do this, and it is a source of comfort. And so I struggle with how much but it's I believe a placebo effect. So I that level of authority, I guess. So I do struggle with that. When you just say, it doesn't matter, just eat whenever, you seem to lose authority or make it seem like it doesn't care, when the next practitioner is saying, you have to do exactly
completely.
This.
Yeah, and it's all about reading your client, right? So if I have a client, and I guess this just speaks to the art and science of nutrition, and I often see this in, for any new practitioners kind of getting out there, they're trying really hard to sort of make sure that they dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And so I notice as the new practitioners, they're going to be a lot more kind of specific. And I think that's great, and a lot of what we're sort of discussing is more, it comes with experience, I think, and having the confidence to go, we don't know that, because actually, like, as you've just pointed out, like, all the things that we thought we sort of, we knew, you're studying now because we actually don't know,
Right.
So it certainly is an art and a science. Jeff, so my claim to fame, you won't know this about me, but I won the Rotorua Marathon in 2005.
Amazing.
It was amazing. I was very fortunate that not a lot of no disrespect intended to who was there, but it was just a very. Yeah,
but that's disrespecting yourself too. Don't sell yourself short. You can only beat who's in front of you.
That is true. what I had for breakfast that day was 5 bread buns, those supermarket bread buns with jam, a spirulina smoothie, and if you've ever looked at the back of them, they've got about 50 grams of carbs, and a banana. And that is the only time I've ever eaten that much food in one sitting. I felt immediately ill, but I had like about an hour before the race start. So by the time the race start was the time I was sort of lining up, it was fine. But actually, what you've just told me, and what of course I know now, probably wouldn't have made that much difference to my overall. Or maybe
well, I mean, it's probably good. I mean, your liver was as high as it probably could have been, as long as that lingering nausea didn't affect you. But I mean, it probably certainly couldn't hurt. I mean, if you're thinking of it, I wouldn't have think it from a bad standpoint. I think that's a fine race meal. Again, as long as it didn't make you feel too full or bloated or something. But from a carb standpoint, I think that's fantastic.
It was amazing, and I really enjoyed it. I can't imagine eating that much now, but that's what you do, when you're young.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, your study's running now. Any other take homes or any other key points that have come from your research now, or what can we expect moving forward? Yeah,
I think the key points are it's been well established that if you're fasted, you will burn more fat during exercise than if you've eaten a carb breakfast. Except for at high intensities, it probably won't matter much. But for endurance exercise, that's well known, and we certainly have added more evidence to that. But for those that want to still burn fat and want to eat, having the protein that is a tool that you can use, and I encourage people to try it to see how they like it. Some people might not want to be that full or might not like it, but it's an option for you. And you won't inhibit any fat. Now, if you're one of those people that, again, are thinking about the performance, if you're doing a short workout, it doesn't really matter what you eat, again, as long as you're comfortable. But don't feel like you have to eat if you're doing an interval workout, unless, again, you're in the context of someone who's training a lot, and let's say maybe more than 10, 12 hours per week. So I think that's what we kind of can take from those other, from the last study. And then this current study is hoping to answer, some of these questions that people assume, and that doesn't matter really over time. I guess there's a difference. We didn't really talk about this, but just a slight difference. Acutely fasted training, it is going through more of your intramuscular triglycerides. There's some different stuff happening acutely when you're fasted training compared to if you've eaten. So if you want to burn more fat, there might be some other benefit to burning more fat during a workout besides just burning fat off your waistline or becoming a better fat burner. Those are the two things people think of mostly, but there actually may be utility that's not those things. So with that said, I think it's not the worst thing to do fasted workout if it's in the right context. And then moving forward, we're hoping to just kind of explore what the things that really matter, what matters, and the levers we can move as practitioners and athletes to get the stuff that. I guess to weed through the things that don't matter, like if you have this meal or that meal before a workout, if it doesn't affect your long-term training, then we don't need to be obsessing over it. Other things certainly do affect things. We want to kind of figure out what are the things that matter and what are the things that maybe people are putting too much undue influence on.
Yeah, nice. And it's interesting what you say about the fasted training with regards to benefits outside of just the here and now and the athlete performance and stuff. I spoke to Mark Matson a couple of weeks ago, and he's an advocate for fasted training because the exercise in that fasted state upregulates a lot of the health benefits that people see from actually just doing that fasting interval themselves. Yeah, so I suppose that's maybe what you were
definitely. I think some things like that, and he certainly knows what he's talking about. He has a body of amazing work. Just kind of think of it like if you're turning over different fuels, the intramuscular triglycerides, you might be just kind of churning over a little bit differently than if you had eaten.
Yeah. Now, you're measuring oxidative stress as well, aren't you?
We did in the last study, and there was really no difference. And so we're able to save a whole lot of money and not analyze it in the next study because it's super expensive.
Yeah.
But just and as a quick background for people, the signaling that happens in response to exercise, again, part of that is due to the oxidative stress. Those serve as the signaling things to tell your body, hey, let's get fitter, let's get stronger. And so it was plausible and think, okay, well, could what you eat affect that oxidative stress? And there's a lot of different measures for that. We picked one that was, a kind of a well-established good marker of it, isoprostanes, but we found no difference from the different treatments on exercise-induced oxidative stress. It's not to say that it definitely doesn't make a difference, but in this case, it didn't seem to make to change anything. So we're not going to look at that in the training study.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess you're right, from a budgeting perspective, it's a bit of a win, really.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Hey, Jeff, so can you please tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, thank you. I suppose the easiest place would be Twitter, I suppose. Yep. Eat, Sleep, Fit, Jeff. And so my personal website is eatsleep.fit. Nice. So I guess you could certainly find me through there. If you're interested at all in the study, if it sounds, if you'd like to just learn a little bit more about what we're doing, you can get me through Twitter, or do you have show notes that you can? Absolutely,
we'll put all of these and your research in the show notes. And you also do see some clients too, Jeff?
Yeah. If that sounds, you can see all that through eatsleep.fit, the website there.
Perfect. Jeff, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, and I really look forward to seeing just, what comes of your next study.
Awesome. Well, I'll share it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff.
Bye.
Alrighty, so hopefully you enjoyed that, and as I said, a lot of Jeff's recommendations to date I've been putting into my own recommendations for athletes. And if you jumped on and signed up to my athlete nutrition plan, you would notice that the pre-training nutrition advice stems from what Jeff has found, and it's protein, bit of fat just before training to help fuel the workout and prevent being in a deficit at the start of the day. So, this is such valuable research, guys, because it's directly translatable into real life and clinical situations, which is just what you want from research, right? You can find Jeff at www.eatsleep.fit, which is also his handle on Twitter and Instagram. You could also email him directly at JROTHSCH@aut.ac.nz. Next week on the podcast, I bring to you my conversation I have with Brianna Stubbs, who would be one of the world experts in ketone metabolism and utilization. And so we go into the sort of nuts and bolts around the utility of using ketone supplements in terms of exercise, in addition to chatting to Brianna about her own background and how her athletic endeavors sort of got her into looking at fuel utilization and the use of exogenous ketones, and whether or not she follows a keto diet herself, and you might be surprised by what she has to say about that, and a whole host of other things. So I'm really sure that you will enjoy that interview as much as you did Jeff's. Until then, though, you can catch me over on Facebook at Mikki Williden Nutrition, on Twitter and Instagram at Mikki Williden. Also over on my website, MikkiWilliden.com, where you can sign up to Monday's Matter, to my athlete plan, or my real food nutrition plan, or the recipe access, or just book in a consultation. I look forward to hearing from you, and until next week, have a great week, team. Alrighty, bye-bye.